This video is about vintage radio tubes from the 1920s. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and give a thumbs up. Thank you. Late in 1920, General Electric developed the UV200 and the UV201 marketed by RCA. The UV200 was made for detector use only. It had a trace of argon gas, which made it a better detector than the UV201. The UV200 had a maximum plate voltage of 45 volts. The UV201 had a maximum plate voltage of 135 volts, could be used as a detector or an amplifier. The letters preceding the vacuum tube number, UV, stands for the base type. The UV200 and 201 had short contact pins on the bottom and a pin on the side of the base for twist lock. You would push down into the socket and twist and lock in place. The base was usually brass. The earlier tubes usually had a brass base and a vacuum tip on the top where they evacuated the vacuum. The UV200 and 201 had a pure tungsten filament that glowed very bright. The filament drew 1 amp at 5 volts. A rheostat was used on these old radios to control the emission by the brightness, the emissions of the filament. Many early radios had windows on the panel in front of the tubes so you could see how bright they were glowing to make sure that you weren't applying too much voltage and wouldn't burn out the tube. I've gotten a lot of comments over the years when friends see the radio running and they see how bright the tube is, and they're warning me to be careful, you're going to burn out that tube, it's too bright, and explaining to them that that's normal for that era. Most radio receivers in the early 20s were regenerative receivers using just 3 tubes or less. Due to the high current consumption at 1 amp apiece, drawing 1 amp apiece to save on the battery, many receivers had several jacks, and you could switch off the tubes that weren't necessary. You could operate the radio right off the detector with 1 tube, or off the first audio amplifier using 2 tubes, or for weak stations, when you want a power loudspeaker, you could plug into a second AF amplifier. In 1922, General Electric developed the UV201A, which had a corrugated tungsten filament, which only drew 1/4 of an amp. This made it possible for the use of the 5-tube TRF with reasonable current consumption. The silver color on the bulb was due to a magnesium getter that was fired to remove any remaining oxygen. It was good practice to use an X-Acto knife, wire brush, fine sandpaper to clean the contacts of the tube pins. The UX201A came out in the mid-20s, had longer pins, plug-in socket. The base still kept the side pin so it could be used in older receivers with twist-in sockets. The evacuation tip is no longer on the top of the bulb. It's now on the base in the socket, so it's not visible. When using old stock vacuum tubes, it is a good practice to shuffle the tubes around for best performance. Some tubes make better detectors, some work better in the RF amplifier, some will work better as an AF amplifier. So moving them around until you get the best performance out of your receiver. In the mid-20s, the UX112 was introduced, which was used as a power amplifier, had a 5-volt filament consumption, and drew 500 milliamps of current. This would be used for the last audio stage in the receiver. In 1921, Western Electric developed the WD11, a dry cell tube that was sold by RCA. The WD11 had a 1.1 volt filament, which is made to be used with a rheostat to drop down the voltage from a 1.5 volt storage battery, and drew 250 milliamps of current. The base had a plug-in socket with an extra wide pin for the anode. The white paste on the stem was a lime getter that was used for the evacuation of any remaining air in the bulb. In the mid-20s, the brass plug-in base was changed to a Bakelite base. WD11 with magnesium getter.
With you, Shaw's WEEI Red Sox Radio Network. Red Sox opening up a 3-game series in Tampa Bay tonight, the start of a 9-game road trip, and they fall to the Rays by a count of 5-3 tonight in St. Petersburg. As Tampa Bay improves to 20-18 on the season, they're now 14-6 at home. The Red Sox drop to 22-17. They're now 9-7 on the road. Tampa Bay gets its 5 runs on 11 hits, no errors. The Red Sox with 3 runs on just 3 hits and no errors. The win goes to Matt.
An adapter so you can use less expensive and easier to come by tubes in place of your WD11. The military VT24 or 864 tube makes an excellent replacement and good performer for in place of a WD11 used with the adapter. The late 20s brought radio receivers to use the electric power mains and AC current. This introduced a new line of vacuum tubes for these AC receivers. The UX226 uses an AF and RF amplifier. The UI227 was usually used as a detector in the early receivers, and later on was also used as an amplifier. It had a cathode and a 5-pin base. The UX171A, otherwise known as the 71A, was used as the final audio amplifier. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to subscribe and like the video. And just as a note, your radios don't have to be museum pieces. They were meant to be used. If you keep going to flea markets, yard sales, buying box loads of tubes when you can get them for a good price, buying old junk radios that are rust buckets, and just collecting and saving all the tubes out of them and all the other parts in them can make for a lifetime of enjoyment and listening.